let's start with an introduction of myself and VC Lab before we jump into the presentation. So my name is Adeo Ressi. I'm CEO of the Decile Group, which is the parent company of VC Lab. I've been an entrepreneur and investor for the better part of 28 years. Half of that time, I was building tech companies like many entrepreneurs and had some great success. I had two separate billion-dollar companies by the age of 30 and actually started the precursor to SpaceX with Elon Musk, who ironically was my college roommate. In the last part of the career, the later 14 years, I've primarily been focused on fixing the investment and venture ecosystems worldwide. So first, I started something called The Funded, which allowed entrepreneurs to rate VCs. I started something called the Founder Institute, which helped founders around the world build investment-ready startups. I created something called the Safe Note, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and done many other things, legal innovations, etc., for both venture and entrepreneurship, including, by the way, launching over 14 funds directly, plus helped maybe another total of 25 or so funds get off the ground. So I've had a lot of experience going into VC Lab and Decile Group. And then what we realized is, like, worldwide, venture capital is still really rare. There's a number of hub cities, I can name them on less than two hands, such as San Francisco, New York, Berlin, Paris, Singapore. And those hub cities have lots of venture activity compared to everywhere else. And then everywhere else pretty much has no venture activity. So we running something like the Founder Institute for over a decade, where we operate in 300 cities, we really saw the need for thriving venture capital ecosystems everywhere. And that was the genesis of VC Lab. And VC Lab provides tools and training 100% free to help the next generation of venture capital managers and venture capital firms get started everywhere, right? We want venture capital firms in every major city around the world. We want venture capital firms supporting every major industry out today. We want venture capital firms working on the grand challenges of humanity, funding entrepreneurs to make the world a better place. And our vision is to transform venture capital into a force for good in the world. And it's only going to happen if more people are involved in the asset class, helping more entrepreneurs get the money they need to make the world a better place. So one of the core principles of VC Lab is something called the Mensarius Oath, which is an ethical code of conduct for venture investors that is designed to ensure that the next generation of venture capital managers and next generation of venture capital firms care about the future, care about the people they support, care about the stakeholders, and really work to make the world a better place. All right, so enough about that. Thank you very much for coming in today. I see more people are joining every minute. So why don't we get started on the presentation about sourcing and closing limited partners. So I'm sure some of you have had the experience of pitching limited partners, and some of you have not had the experience pitching limited partners. So I'm going to take you through an overview of the process and provide some tips and tricks along the way. So the first thing is that there are lots and lots and lots of different kinds of LPs out there, and you're going to have a thesis for your fund, and your fund thesis will define the geography that you're in, the sector or industry that of the startups you're going to fund, the stage of startups you're going to fund, etc. Okay? And so once you have a thesis, and so in many ways you need a thesis first and foremost in order to even start thinking of pitching LPs, because without a thesis, who are these mysterious LPs that you're going after? You have no idea. So once you have a thesis and you know what sector, what stage, what geography you're going after, you can start to target limited partners and create a profile of the kind of limited partners that you're going to go after. So the idea is that you want to profile these limited partners as best you can, right? So you want to say, for example, archetypes include angel investors, exited founders, successful executives at large companies. They could be corporations themselves. And there's, a few dozen key LP archetypes in the world today. And your idea is to say, this is my thesis, okay? Who are the best types of people to go after and target with my thesis? And we've actually even made a tool to help you. So let's go use some of these tools. So if we go to Go VC Lab, for example, and we search up thesis, right? So I'm going to come back to this. Let's go to, so we could just take a sample thesis, right? So these are some guides here on how to run a thesis, right? How to write a thesis. So there's tons and tons of resources on Go VC Lab to write a thesis. So let me actually search for a thesis to use. I'm going to do this live. Let's see. But maybe I shouldn't do it live because it's taking me longer to find what I need. Let's see. So there are tons of resources to start with on Go VC Lab. And I know I have some sample theses, and I want to just, okay, here we go. Here's a sample thesis, right? And we've made a tool that you can literally take your thesis and it will help you create, you see, okay. So now here is a Chat GPT, and you got to use Chat GPT 4 in order to use it. So what is your 1 sentence investment thesis? So you can literally just paste in your investment thesis into the tool, into Chat GPT 4 with the prompt that we've engineered, and it will literally give you a target ideal archetypes for you to go after. And I'll let one finish, and then we'll take a look at it to give you a sense of what they are. So they're all different kinds of archetypes that you can go after. So this says alumni networks, affinity networks. Okay, that's a great one. The thesis here is Purple Ventures is launching a $5 million angel fund in Brussels to back European government technology startups that leverage the partners' expertise in various political and bureaucratic leadership roles across the EU. And so they're launching a, GovTech fund in Europe. Okay, so go after who's in a kind of LP that might be interested in a GovTech fund. Well, European alumni networks, maybe a European government alumni network. So if I was in government, I probably served with other people in government. People go in and out of government, even in the EU. So there's probably some sort of network of government officials, right? And then you say your professional background, someone who's been working in government for a while with lots of experience, held political roles. Maybe it gives you their educational and personal background, their investment experience, some interests that they have, some personal interests, so professional interests, personal interests, and some of the networks that they belong to. And then it even gives you search terms, and then you can click the search term, and it actually pulls up a LinkedIn search for those things. And then you can sort of find people that because a lot of time when you search, and let's say you go to people, it will start pulling up people. Oh, it's a second degree connection. Well, I don't have many. Well, first of all, I'm not in politics, so obviously I probably don't have many of these people in my networks, but maybe I have government technology people. So click on that, go to people here. And again, it will show me any again, I don't have any first degree connections, but if you did, again, I don't work in government, so maybe I picked not the best one. But if you, ideally, you'll have experience in your thesis. So as you start to, you will have first degree connections, and all of a sudden now you have LP targets. So going back to the presentation for a second, it's pretty, I'm not saying that the Chat GPT and these tools are going to get it right, but it's going to give you ideas, right? Oh, yeah, maybe there's an alumni network of these X people that worked in government or had various government roles. Let me see if I can find some of those. Or maybe there, let's look at another one it suggested. So it might have suggested here. Oh, and it, by the way, tells you how to do it as well, how to go after them. High net worth individuals. Okay, that's a no-brainer. That's a very common LP archetype. European political affiliates. Well, right there as an FY, lots of high net worth individuals fund political things. So that's another great example of an LP archetype. And then it explains it. So back to the point, once you have your thesis, really you got to start thinking about the types of people that are going to be really interested in backing your thesis, right? And those are the LP archetypes. And then you have to search your networks and go through your networks to find those people and start building lists of actual people, which is the next step. Well, actually, it's a step after that. So and part of it. So number one, get your thesis down, start developing those archetypes. I recommend starting with 3 archetypes, right? 3 ones that you really feel make sense. We've created a tool to help you do that, make it really easy. And of course, the tool's output's not going to be perfect, everyone, right? So it's going to say things that you're going to say, maybe this isn't right, so I'm going to change it. But it gives you enough of a direction to go. Then, once that's done, you want to go after, let me close some of these windows to make room for new stuff. You want to start thinking about what does your fund size broken down by kinds of LPs look like? So we call this your LP construction or your closing model. And how this looks is you're going to say, you're going to have an LP archetype. You're going to say, I think this LP archetype might give me $1 million on average, right? I'd like to have 2 of them, and that will be 2 million of my $10 million fund. Then I think we're going to go after these types of LPs, and they may give 500,000 each. I'm going to target 6 of them for 3 million. Then I'm going to go for some high net worth individuals, another LP archetype. Maybe I'll get 250 from them. I'll have 12 of them for 3 million. And then my friends, etc., 100K, 22 million. So what you want to do next is really come up with a plan of who is going to invest how much, how many of them do you need, and how does that get you to your target fund size. Now, let me tell you something. I know a lot of people here are thinking, well, I'm going to launch a like $50 million fund, or I'm going to launch, $100 million fund, or some big number. Okay. When you start as a venture capitalist and you start a venture capital firm, it's like fund 1 is like an MVP at a startup, right? You don't make the final product to get product market fit. You make a rough product that you continually tweak and adjust. And then when you have product market fit, you go crazy. Well, fund 1 is the equivalent of an MVP in the startup world, right? You don't want your fund size to be too big, because then it will take you a long time to raise it. You don't really know if you have product market fit yet, right? So you want to make your fund size 5 million, 10 million, maybe 15 million. You really don't want to go above 15 million, because even looking at this, right? This is a $10 million fund, okay? And you've got 8, 20, 40 limited partners in it, okay? So now just do some basic math on them. To get 40 limited partners, right? A good pitching ratio is that you get 1 in 5 people that you pitch to commit. Okay. So 40 times 5 is 200, right? So now you have to have and pitch 200 limited partners. That's going to take hundreds of hours, maybe even 1,000 hours, right? So that's a lot of work. I just want to let you know that's a lot of work. Now, 1 in 5 means that you've actually kind of hit the product market fit pretty good. So in fact, it could very well be that you're only getting 1 in 10, right? Now you have to pitch 400 limited partners, and now you're talking about 1,000 plus hours or even thousands of hours, right? So in that early fund 1, right, in that MVP fund, you want to keep your fund size lower. You want to have these really good archetypes, and you want to come up with this LP construction example here. And then in what will happen in fund 2 and fund 3, these numbers get bigger, right? Because a lot of the experienced limited partners don't want to invest in fund 1s because they are an MVP. And if they do invest, they want to put less amount of money because it's risky. So what they do is they increase the amount of money they put, and you get new LPs that want to put more money in as you move into fund 2, as you move into fund 3, as you move into fund 4. Okay, so you want to really keep that fund 1 size low so that you can pitch a reasonable amount of people and get your fund closed in a reasonable amount of time. So after you have your archetypes, after you have a model of how you're going to convert those archetypes into investment amounts and get to your target fund size, which again should be 5, 10, or 15 million. For many of you, it really should be 5 million. You want to, at that point, start researching the different LP archetypes so that you can find specific people to go after. And again, going back, the tool creates the keywords and actually creates the search link for you. So let's look at the third LP archetype, exited founders. That's great. So at GovTech exited founders in the EU. So you could say angel investment. Okay, so you can click some of the links that it gives you. You can go to people, and then you can start seeing who do you know. Now, let me talk about this research. Whoop, I don't want to have private messages up there. Let me talk about this research for you. So the you in your first fund are primarily going to go after first and second degree connections with some third degree connections, right? And so let me talk about this for a minute because it's super important. You're a new manager with limited or no experience running a venture capital firm. You may have even been a venture capitalist before at another firm, but most people who start a firm have not started a firm before, because if they started a firm, they're running that firm. So if you're going out and you're starting a firm, some have, but 99% of people have not run a firm before. So you are a really unproven asset. Now, it doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. You're just unproven, okay? So the people that are most likely to back you on Fund 1 are going to be people that know you and people that trust you. And if it's not them, then it's going to be second degree connection people that they may not know you, but someone very well knows them, and that there's that trust conveyance. So the research for your limited partners should really focus on what I'll call first and second degree connections. And thankfully, LinkedIn is very clear about this and shows like which is first and which is second. Of course, I have, because we're doing a GovTech fund, European government tech entrepreneur, I just don't know any real many people in government tech, I guess that looks like. So I'm only showing second degree connections here, no first degree connections. And let that be a lesson, by the way. If you're searching for LPs in your LP archetypes and you're not pulling up any first degree connections, that's a problem, right? Because your first degree connections are the ones that are most likely to come into the first close, and your second degree connections are most likely to come into subsequent closes on your venture capital fund. And then if you're lucky, you'll get some third degree connections by the time you're done, but usually third degree connections come in fund two, etc. So use the tools, use the keywords, look for first degree connections that could be LPs first, then, start looking for second degree connections second. And if again, you're seeing that you're not getting first degree connections when searching for keywords, let's say in LinkedIn or in your contact database or whatever you're using to search, you can use Crunchbase in Google as well, then you really should refactor your thesis because you don't know enough potential LPs directly, and you might want to find a thesis where you do know potential LPs directly and don't have to rely on second degree connections. So once your research is done and you're building this list, you're going to start also wanting to parallel process building connectors, right? And connectors are people that that also know limited partners, okay? So if you have and these are people that will vouch for you, that will introduce you to limited partners, right? And help you to get those relationships off the ground. Because as I mentioned, your first close will be largely first degree connections, people that you know well. But by the time you're moving on your second close or third close, you're going to start to work with what are second degree connections, meaning that there is a connector between you and them that is building that trust, creating that relationship, and helping. And those we call connectors. Okay. Now, the good news is we've also created a connector tool to help you here. So I'll pull that up. And so you can take the thesis that you have, right? So we'll take this Purple Ventures thesis. Of course, I know no one in GovTech, so it's either a good one or a bad one to use in the demo, but let's continue this conversation. And these Chat GPT tools only work in Chat GPT 4 as an aside. So you paste it in here, boom, and it will actually start giving you ideas of people who could be connectors in your network to LP. So in this one, it says an ecosystem leader, the government tech ecosystem, former EU Commission director, founder of a GovTech startup. So giving you ideas, giving you sense of background, and it gives you, again, LinkedIn search terms so that you can, once again, start looking for people in your network who could be good connectors to the LPs that you need to forge relationships with. And so the important thing here is that connectors really are the fabric of how you build relationships with LPs that you do not know that well. So in some cases, you may have met someone at a party, but they're really friends with someone else first, or maybe you've heard of someone and maybe they've heard of you, but they're, again, through a friend, and you want to activate these connectors to help you get to those limited partners. And one of just a small tip on this, you don't want, because of the general solicitation rules that I discussed at the opening of this presentation, you don't want to have people sending around your thesis, sending around your deck. You can do that with a startup, but you cannot do that with a fund. It's not legal in most jurisdictions. It's definitely not legal in Europe. It's definitely not legal in the US. And in most countries, it's the same because of these general solicitation rules. So what you do instead with the connectors, and we even with LPs that you don't know well, is you do a meeting just to meet you, right? So the connector talks, hey, you should really meet my friend Adeo. He's working on something really interesting. I think you two have a lot in common, and you should jump on a quick call, right? So it's not, hey, Adeo has this fund. The fund is doing this. You should really talk to him, right? You can't do that. You can do it with a startup, but you can't do it with a fund, right? So instead, the introduction is centered around you, your background, what you've accomplished, similar interests, stuff like that. And your first meeting with the LP is really like a meet and greet. So your connectors are connecting you with these LPs. You meet the LPs, you establish a relationship with the LPs, and then the criteria to overcome general solicitation on a high level, and I'm not a lawyer giving legal advice here, but I'm just on a high level, is that you have a pre-existing relationship with the LP, and you know they're wealthy, essentially. And so once you create that connection with the LP and you have a nice meeting with them, you could say, hey, I'd love to tell you more about a project I'm working on. Can we get on another call? Right? And you set up a second call, at which time you're in the clear to pitch them. Right? And so connectors are vital because you're going to run out of your first degree network very quickly. Okay, you're going to run out of your first degree network probably at your first close. And just to give you a sense of the average numbers of a first close, the average of all first closes we've seen are 18 hard circle limited partners that, sign that they're interested. And then about 13 of those actually wire capital. So again, just doing the math from before of if you're doing really well, about 1 in 5 come in. You're pitching at hundreds of LPs to get the 18 signed hard circled commitments and 13 closed on capital, and that will exhaust your first degree connection. So you need to use connectors to get to the second degree connectors and build those relationships for your second, third closes, etc. So you really need to start working on connectors early. And just as a small tip on that, you set up a meeting with a connector, you give them an update about what you're working on, you can give them some language to introduce you to LPs. And a lot of people are like, do I compensate connectors? You don't compensate connectors. You offer to help connectors with whatever they need help with. And so it's sort of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. You just be a good human and help someone out with what they need, and they'll be a good human and help you out with what you need. There doesn't always need to be an economic relationship. And then you're going to set up the meetings. And I talked a little bit about this with that introduction meeting first, and this is just super mission critical. Now, you're going to get to a point where you're going to have figure out that you're going to have like avoiding general solicitation, if you will become innate to you. So you'll meet someone at an event, you'll form a relationship, then you'll like go and pitch them second, or you'll jump on a really quick call with them. So you're going to avoiding general solicitation after a little while will become innate. It will just become like part of your operating style, if you will. But to just as a simple rule of thumb for those going out for the first time and pitching for the first time, delineate a get to know meeting first and a pitch meeting second. Okay, it's super important. And the reality is most limited partners that you don't know very well are not going to invest in you after one meeting anyway. So you're going to need multiple meetings anyway. So just assume if you don't know them, you're going to have at least 2 meetings. And the first meeting could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. It doesn't have to be very long, but you want to get to know them first before you pitch them for money. Okay. And then, probably the most important thing is asking for money. Now, if you know the limited partner already and the meeting's going well, you can ask them after one meeting. If you don't know the limited partner very well and the meeting is going well in the second meeting, you can ask them after 2 meetings, because the first meeting you get to know them, the second meeting you pitch. And sometimes it will take 3 meetings before you feel that the chemistry is right and things are going well. But here's the thing. You should never, ever take more than 3 meetings to ask. Okay? And if you are, it's usually either the meetings aren't going well and it's a waste of time and you should stop with that LP, or you're not asking when you should. And I see this far too often. You have to ask for money. Okay. And there are lots of ways to ask for money. I could do a whole session on how to ask for money, right? Because it's not, there are lots of ways to do it. So you could do it in a very, I'll give some examples, a very passive way, like, oh, we're going to be closing in 2 months. Do you or anyone maybe have interest in participating, right? So it's not like, or hey, I'd really love this meetings. If it would be great to have you come in at the 500K level and really back what we're trying to do. That's more direct. And so there's indirect, direct, all different kinds of ways to ask, but you have to ask. Okay. If you don't, it's not like they're going to volunteer. Oh, yeah. Sometimes they do. I've probably pitched, I don't know, hundreds of LPs, many hundreds. And maybe a handful of times people volunteer. And usually when that happens, it's like, it's because of a connector. So for example, I pitched a group of Mexican billionaires. And I got to the Mexican billionaires because of a connector. And then one of them was like, I'm in for $1 million. I was like, oh, that's great. Thank you very much. He's like, I'll send you over to a few of my friends. And I went to the friends and they said, how much is so-and-so in? I'm like, he's in for $1 million. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm in for $1 million. So they actually asked me. So that it does happen, but it's pretty rare, right? And usually it will happen when we have a really good connector that brings you in and warms everything up. In this case, again, it was like someone who already had committed $1 million and was telling his friends that they should do so as well. But leave that aside, because that's not something you can count on. You're going to need to ask, right? And there are lots of different ways to ask. It's super important that you do. But I want to stress that this is not like, oh, I'm going to launch a fund. It's going to take a few months. So it's going to take you months and require pitching hundreds of LPs to close a fund. I just want to give you a sense here. If you're a new manager not in VC Lab, it's going to take you 18 to 24 months on average to get to the first close. In VC Lab, we're getting people to the first close in 5.7 months to be exact, a little under 6 months, 5.7 months. Okay. So that's like a 3 or more times savings on your effort and time. All right. But either way, it's not a week, it's 5.7 months up to 18 to 24 months to the first close. Then most managers in VC Lab take maybe another 12 to 18 months to close the remainder of their fund. And I see in the real world, like outside of VC Lab, people take 4 years to close the fund, right? So it's not that easy because you have to pitch lots of people. Now we're going to give you lots of tools and help you. And my goal is to just condense that time. I'd like to see people get to a first close in under 6 months and a final close in under 12 months. And we're getting there at VC Lab. The first part we've achieved, the second part we're close to already, but it's going to take time and a lot of pitching, okay? And one of the problems in the industry, right, is that LPs don't say no, right? So you as a GP could be talking to a billionaire, okay? And they're like, oh yeah, this is great. Yeah, let's come on my boat on Friday and let's have some drinks and we'll chat. And you go to the boat and you're like, I was on the billionaire's boat. He's interested. No, okay. Let me be super clear. It's if, and these are some examples of no, but basically LPs just don't say no. Okay. So if you're on a billionaire's boat and they're not saying yes, but you're being strung along, okay? And even sometimes when you ask and press LPs, you get things like this. Wow, you're amazing, but your fund size is too small. We only do $20 million funds and above. And so then you're like, oh my God, if I just raise my fund to $20 million, he'll invest. No, it's a no. Okay. And you know, anything that's not a yes is a no. So you're amazing, but your fund is too small. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I'll just raise my fund and they'll come in. It's a no. We're over allocated, come back next year. Oh, I'll just wait until next year and they're going to come in. It's a no. Okay. We love the vision, but you need more experience. Oh, I'll just bring on a partner with more experience and they're going to come in. No, they're not going to come in. It's a no. Okay. We're mainly looking at AI funds at the moment. Oh, I'll just add AI into my thesis and they'll come in. No. All right. They're not. It's a polite way of saying no. And worse, most don't even say this. This is like, at least you're like, I think that's a no. And I'm going to tell you, if it's not a yes, it's a no. But most string you along. They're like, come to my boat. I'm having dinner on Friday. Come to the dinner. And you're like, oh my God, I am being strung along. But you as a new GP are like, this LP is showing interest to me. He's taking me to dinner. I'm on the boat. And it's just that they're wasting your time. Okay. And so don't change your fund strategy because an LP is saying no, right? It's super important for you to understand that any feedback that isn't a yes is a no. And again, I'll just say that again, anything that's not a yes is a no. So if they're not, there's a lot of kind of stuff on Twitter and a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, like kind of joking about this, like the ways that LPs say no. And they, a lot of times they sound kind of like a yes or a maybe. Like, yeah, you know, we're over allocated right now. We love what you're doing. Just come back next year. And it's like, no, right? But you're hearing like, oh, that's a maybe or a yes. I'm just telling you from countless experience firsthand, countless experience secondhand, it's a no. And it's very important for you to understand that. And right now, everybody, and there's a lot of negative media about venture capital at the moment. And I don't know what is going on, but right now, this chart was through September, and it goes up like a hockey stick in October. We're seeing the largest number of LPs committing to GPs in history. And you'll see this dip right here in the summer doldrums in August. So just, I want to talk about that for a minute. There's seasonality in fundraising, and the summer is normally a dead season. So you see a little deadness in May, but June and July were kind of huge months for the summer, which was weird. And then you saw the summer doldrums in August. Normally the summer doldrums are in June or July. So there was some weird stuff going on this year with COVID being, gone, if you will, or no longer a pandemic, and people returning to work, etc. And so the summer was delayed. But I can tell you right now, this chart goes way up and to the right. October is looking like an insane month. We have more commitments from LPs in October than we did in August, and we're going to be the largest month in history. And so what we're seeing right now is that LPs are committing at the highest level to new and emerging managers in history. And we have 600 funds using our platform. They're all emerging managers. So this data is real data from real managers with real LPs committing today. And it's a good time. So, and if you are interested in starting a VC, there is no better time than right now. And I'll explain briefly why. Because first, as the data is indicating, it's the highest level of limited partner commitments in history that we've seen, okay? And so forget the negative media, forget this stuff that you're reading. A lot of that stuff is later stage funds are struggling because of the IPO market and whatever else. And if you have a $7 billion fund, you have a marketing group, you've got or $7 billion under management, I should say. Some people have more than a $7 billion fund, but these big funds have marketing, they have this, they have that, and they're all talking to media, oh, woe is me, this, that. New managers working on, and emerging managers funding early stage startups have none of these issues. And in fact, there is not only a renaissance in venture capital, there's a ton of LP money flowing. There's also just one of the best times to invest in startups. Historically, around and shortly after a crash, some of the best companies like Uber, Instagram, etc., Slack, were all started in these periods. And because there's less competition from other entrepreneurs, right? Which is better for you to get talent, better for you to get, etc. Because a lot of people are like, oh, entrepreneurship is, the world's in trouble. I don't want to start a company. It's too risky, right? So these risk-averse entrepreneurs don't come in the market. So it's really the risk takers, the best entrepreneurs spring to action, start companies. And then on the investor side, it's easier because you don't have to review 1,000 deals to make a single investment. There's less great deals out there, so you can really focus on the good deals. Valuations are lower. So it's just a phenomenal time to invest right now. Now, what I want to do is that if you have questions, do me a favor, get them into the Q&A now, and we'll start going through your different questions one by one. And if you do me a favor and upvote questions that you like, there's a little thumbs up icon under the questions. We'll answer the most upvoted questions first and then go down to the least. And so get any questions you have in about closing LPs, any questions you have in about VC Lab, or even starting a venture fund. We'll be happy to answer them all. But don't put them in the chat. Put them in the Q&A, okay? Ben, do you want to come on and start reading some questions, and we'll...
Yep, sounds good. All right, first question we got here from Max. Is it a good approach to set a minimum check of $500K for a $10 million fund to focus on less connections, but with a higher amount?
Well, not really, because all right, first of all, no one writes a $500,000 check. You do capital calls. So if you make a $500,000 commitment, you will usually do a 20% capital call on close. So they'll only have to actually write $100,000 check, and then you call capital as you need. Unfortunately, it's as a new or emerging, so emerging managers are different. As a new manager, it's very, very, very difficult to get someone to give you $500,000, right? Because you're completely unproven. There's like no guarantee that you're going to be successful. So it's a complete risky bet. And that's why first and second degree connections are the most likely people to back you. And in my experience, most first and second degree connections just don't have $500,000 to throw on a high risk bet on an individual. So generally speaking, the $500,000 or $1 million mark are very limited in the numbers that you'll be able to get. And that's why even a $10 million fund is very difficult to do as a new manager, because to do a $10 million fund, to your point, Max, you need to have $1 million and $500,000 commitments, but it's unlikely for you to get them in any sort of volume. So I recommend, if you want to get a $10 million fund, you set your fund size at 5 million and you try to oversubscribe as best you can and get to 10.
Great. I just got a commitment for $1 million. Do you have any advice on how I could leverage that to meet and close more LPs?
Yeah, no. So you don't, there's a lot of, or first, there's verbal commitments which aren't worth very much. If someone says, I really want to back you and I'm going to give you $1 million, that's not, in the best case scenario in the developed nation, that's a 25% likelihood that they're actually going to make the investment. So, and I see that you say sweat-free apparel. We're talking now about investing into venture capital firms and funds, not startups. So if you get $1 million verbal commitment into a VC fund, 25% likelihood that will materialize into money. If you get, so what you want to do is get what's called a PACT, a PACT, and you can search PACT commitment letters. Maybe you could put the link into the chat then. So the PACT is a non-binding, and there's a PACT for startups, by the way, and there's also a PACT for VC firms. And so you want to get them to sign something non-binding that they're interested in. That's the first thing you need to do. And then they move from what's called soft circled to hard circled, and the probability goes up from 25% to 75%. But it's still not 100%. And then second, you never want to kiss and tell with investors as a startup or as a fund. So you don't want to be like, I got Jason Calacanis as an investor in my fund. And someone's going to be like, that guy's a dick. I don't want to have him in my fund. Or other people will be, I love Jason. But you don't know who likes who doesn't like who. So you don't want to name drop. That's a terrible thing. So never, ever, ever name drop as a founder, never, ever name drop as a capital raising venture capitalist. But the one thing you can do, right, is you can ask that investor for people that they recommend who might be a good investor to participate.
All right. Could you walk us through the expected timing of the first, second, etc. closes for cohort 13?
Well, so it's not so much cohort 13. I mean, these are just numbers of, because cohort 13 is going to be like hopefully every other cohort, maybe even better. We're actually going to shoot to make it better, of course, just to give you a sense of how things are getting better. Cohort 12 has raised as much money as cohort 11, and cohort 12 is in the first month, and cohort 11 is in the last month. So in month 1 of the program, cohort 12's raised as much money as cohort 11 is at the end of the program, which is month 4, just as an FYI. So hopefully cohort 13 will get even bigger, right? That's our goal. And so the right now that we're seeing under 6 months to time to first close. And then we're seeing around 18 months to close the fund. Now we're working additional. So it's 6 plus 18, so roughly 24 months to final close. And when you work with us, we and you use our back office and all the things we do to help managers, you can do something that you don't normally see in the real world, which are rolling closes, because our systems and our processes, we don't charge for closing. So when you go outside in the real world, so to speak, and you work with a law firm and a back office provider, an accounting firm, etc., every time you close, they charge you money. And so it could be 5, maybe 10, sometimes $25,000 per close. So what you end up doing is you bundle everything because it's expensive. You don't want to be, to spend $5,000 to $25,000 to take in $100,000 check. That's crazy, right? So you bundle everything and you do a first, second, third close. And usually your first close is for 10 to 20%. Your second close brings you to about 50% of the fund size. And then your third, you try to get it done in the third close for 100%. But when you're working with us, you can do rolling closes. So when an LP comes in, you just send them the paperwork, they close, come in, and there's no additional cost. So you don't need to bundle them. But it still is taking about 18 months. And our goal right now is we're trying to bring that into about 12 months. And if we bring it into 12 months, we'll be more than twice as fast as you see in the normal market. So we're more than 3 times as fast to the first close. And our goal is to be more than twice as fast for the final close.
All right, so Felicia's asking, how many capital calls do you suggest? And as an example, minimum ticket size of over $100,000 over 4 calls.
So that's not how it works. So you call capital as you need it, right? So you might not have any deals. You may, and so why you don't want to have, when you have capital sitting in a bank account, not being marked up or working in deals, it hurts your IRR, your returns, your TVPI. It hurts your because you're sitting on capital versus deploying capital. So that capital is not making money. It's just sitting in a bank account. So you don't want to overcall capital. It happens. Look, lots of funds sit on money. It hurts their IRR, but they want to have some dry powder ready to invest. So they'll overcall. But the proper way to do it is to call capital as you need it. And as a result, you can't really tell limited partners, oh, we're going to do it like this. What you can say is that, look, our active investment period is, let's say, 3 years. And we plan to call 90% of the capital over 3 years as we see exciting deals to invest in. And that's the right way to do it.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. Maybe we can get like 2 more questions in. Best practices on how to ask for money.
That's a whole thing. Search our blog at govclab.com. I think there's a whole article on that includes different ways to ask for capital. But GoVCLab has tons of resources for this, and that would take way more than 2 minutes. Why don't you prioritize like one or okay, did you get permission from There's a question of, did I get permission from the billionaire to add? No, the billionaires told each other how much they invested in the Mexican example. And then it kind of sucked because I was like, maybe I could do more than $1 million. And they're like, $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. Which, I mean, it's not bad, don't get me wrong, but they definitely could have put more than $1 million, but each one put in $1 million because they were all talking to each other behind the scenes. Oh, there's a question, what do we do when an LP says yes? So you want to get a packed commitment letter from the LP. And the idea is that once you get commitment letters for about 10% of your fund size or greater, and you have another 10% soft circle, which means that someone said they're going to invest, but maybe they add some qualifiers like, well, I'm probably going to invest $100,000 to $200,000. That's what's called a soft circle, right? So once you have 10% hard circled and 10% soft circled, you'll start or greater, you'll start a closing process. And so, and you want to ideally do that in under 6 months, preferably under 4 months from when you get your first commitment. Because if a commitment gets too old, if it's like 8 months old or 9 months old, then it's not as good as a commitment that's 4 or 5 months old. So you want to try and get as quickly as you can to that 10% hard, 10% soft, and then you're going to begin a closing process. Now, normally that closing process itself takes 2 months. So, it's not, it takes time to close. A very, very fast closing process in the United States will take a month. A fast closing process will take 2 months. Okay. And that's in the US. If you're in other places like Europe or wherever, it can take 6 months to a year because you have to get government approval. Bank accounts often take 2 or 3 months to set up in the EU. So it's very, very complicated. Bank accounts take, in some cases, months to set up in the US as well. So there are lots and lots of questions here. Let's do this. We're out of time, but I do want to help. So we're going to have events like this all the time. And I have a LinkedIn post with the deck that I used. So if you go to that LinkedIn post, and maybe you could put it quickly in the chat here, and I know, Ben, you got to run. Put in your questions in the comments to the LinkedIn post with this deck, and I'll do my best to answer everyone's questions there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.